I was asked to talk about collaboration in the context of green infrastructure, which sort of stumped me for a little bit, but actually, when you start thinking about it, I mean, it's really, really crucial to the way we move forward, because we're in a sort of very changing environment in terms of the way people work, the way the construction industry works, the way development projects are coming forward. The way we think about delivering green infrastructure requires different ways of thinking. And I always refer back to this, which I think is a really good starting point. So Darwin's sort of introduction to collaboration. In the long history of humankind and animal kind too, those who learn to collaborate and improvise most effectively have prevailed. And I think we're in a transitional time where the role of landscape architects and ecologists and people who are pioneering sort of green infrastructure ideas have an opportunity. Because it sits alongside the sort of things that Tom was saying, where the construction industry, development industry is looking to change how they deliver projects. The financial mechanisms, how do we make efficiencies, how do we work as teams, is crucial to this. And we've been part of a project that has been led by Andrew Wright Associates, looking at the construction industry and how collaboration in a different way could work. And there's an awful lot of people been involved, ourselves and the Landscape Institute have sort of helped to sort of get this going. And basically it's about finding new tools for how we can work together and how we can identify common values within teams and how the right people can actually pioneer the right stages of the project. So for instance, if it is a heavily environmental-led project, then it gives the chance of landscape architects, landscape planners, landscape managers, ecologists to have a bigger role at that right from the beginning. So this is something that's going to come out over the next year. You'll see more of this, I think, because you can see through here, it's actually been tested on places like Heathrow, HS2. There's a whole load of big authorities really exploring how they can change the way they work. And it has been really positive. The response to the process is really positive. So for me, green infrastructure and how we design for that has two aspects to it. One is it's the sort of the mechanics of it, how we calculate the benefits, how do we promote the benefits, how do we work out the process of what happens when we're thinking about it. The other one is how do we think about the quality of life, really, for the people, the biodiversity that is going to inhabit that space, which is less well researched and less well pioneered, I think, in the way we do things. But we are in a situation where how we operate is changing. We need a different language. We need different ways of working. You know, we need to think much more three-dimensionally and holistically about projects. So, you know, diagrams like this are very typical of the sort of work that we would do. We start talking about the systems, water management alongside the aesthetic, the sort of visual, the spatial environment. How do you blend those together and communicate those in the way of green infrastructure? And of course, green infrastructure has brought a whole load of other sort of thinking in terms of the technologies of sustainable urban drainage, green roofs, all these sort of things that we think about that we need to be very familiar with. And it is extraordinary, actually, the team that you need to plant a really important tree in a city. If you start looking at the number of consultants who might have some input to that. So how do we really focus that? How do we use that in an interesting way? I just want to talk a little bit about Gardens by the Bay in Singapore. And it's actually really weird because we started that project in 2006, and you know, it's been really interesting to see the journey of that and how it's been sort of profiled. But fundamentally, the Singapore government have an amazing strategy and policy for green infrastructure. And they had that way back then, and they have polished it and refined it and developed it since then. So if anybody really wants to get into how the planning systems work or the policies, policy framework, sustainability blueprints, just have a little look at what Singapore have done to sort of set that up, because it really does create an amazing framework right at the high level that brings investment, it brings sort of discipline, it brings respect from all the other sort of ministries and authorities. But for us, you know, it was about bringing a team together. It's about, you know, who is the right team for the job. And here We have our client, Dr. Tan, Paul Baker from Wilkinson Architects, Patrick Bellew from Atelier 10 on environmental systems, myself, and Neil Thomas from Atelier 1 on structures. And it was a great team, and the client was a fundamental part of that team in terms of bringing it forward. Because we were trying to do things that hadn't really been thought about before, thinking about the integration of environmental systems and landscape and structure. How do you make a air-conditioned glass house in the tropics energy neutral? Really interesting opportunities. But the creative side was key to it as well, because it needed to have a presence, it needed to have a profile, an identity, and these are sort of an early image of how we imagined the super trees could be, which have become one of the emblems for the project. Starting off as sketches, developing things, pushing ideas back and forwards from all the different members of the team. How will we make it work in the day? How do we make it work at night? How do we sort of build in sort of environmental aspects to this that will really be really fantastic and efficient? So it's not just about here's an amazing thing, it's actually doing a job. And also from the structural point of view, how do we make this tree beautiful, lightweight, very efficient? And in all these cases, trying to find ways of thinking about how we could make, it's interesting, that's back to front, isn't it? Back to, how we could make them really work from an environmental point of view. And then here you can see the PVs on the top of the super trees, and then these trees that vary from 25 meters to 50 meters high, all of them clad in plants. Every tree has got a different planting scheme, mainly epiphytes that are working with the, living off the atmosphere of Singapore with a little bit of irrigation, basically just plants clinging to the sides there. And they've created this amazing biodiversity, incredible tropical gardens, and all part of the spectacle of the place. So these are it's all innovations that we're starting to test. And as in the UK, what you can do in the tropics is quite extraordinary with green infrastructure, with green walls, vertical greening, green roofs. In no time at all, you have an amazing matrix of plants. And thinking about lighting, making a quality of life environment for people in the tropics means you've got to make the nighttime experience really good. It's more comfortable. Let's give them places to go. Let's make the places. It's a nighttime garden, and it's an important part of the living environment of Singapore. And the lighting designers were exploring how they could sort of get these trees to talk to each other and create a different sort of moods at different times of the day and night. And it's been hugely successful. It's one of the most amazing gathering places really in Singapore now, to go and hang around at the base of the super trees at night and watch the show, which is also linked to sound systems. You can get up in the air, you can get up to a restaurant at the top of the big one. A very sort of spectacular experience. And down below, lots of space for events, for those nighttime gatherings. And at the moment, there's a big sort of dinosaur show because it's a children's festival. But these are they are spectacular emblems, really, about how you can start to, with a bit of passion and a bit of vision, you can create some extraordinary landscape interventions in cities that really, really have some power. And I could talk about the water in a similar way. The whole of the Gardens by the Bay is a very intelligent sort of water system. We collect all the water off the site into the lakes. The lakes provide the irrigation water. There's a series of sort of habitats around the edges which are polishing the water, which then goes into the reservoir next door. So it basically becomes part of the sustainable water system for Singapore as a city. And it's obviously great when you get green infrastructure sort of promoted around the world, as this is a really cool thing to do on Lonely Planet, and even in sort of games. And as Tom said, I mean, what was amazing for us to see it in Planet Earth 2 as one of these symbols of this is something about the future, which is really great for us to be part of. On a different tack. So that was a design team collaboration. That was about a client design team working within a sort of government framework to deliver something really interesting and creative. Back in London, a few years ago, we worked on sort of a regeneration project for a part of Westminster, of Paddington Green, which is really very much what Tom was talking about. It's most of our places in the UK are built already. So how do we retrofit our cities, our places, our towns, our villages with green infrastructure, with all of the sort of constraints that we have with the built environments, the highways, the road networks, the services. I'm going to flip through this quite fast, but basically this is a part of London that was very denuded in terms of green space and quality of life, life expectancy, and the whole proposal is really very much about trying to look at all of the public realm and make it more valuable and more useful and more beautiful for the residents. Once again, a big team of people engaged with that: ecologists, architects, engineers, cost consultants, and we were looking through this project, which at one level is just really how do we make nicer streets? How do we use this project to deliver a whole new agenda of thinking about climate change? What do we do within this project to address climate change? And it invariably involved basically turning a lot of the hard space into green and trying to sort of find value in those green spaces and bring them into access by the public. And that's, a number of ideas, lots more trees, rain gardens, play spaces, community gardens, food allotments, biodiversity areas, and lots of connected linkages. So you begin to think about how you can unlock all of these peripheral things behind the fences, these roadways. How do you bring those into something which is more valuable to the wider public? So you begin to sort of recondition that section of the street so that it's much more valuable generally. And that obviously involved a lot of consultation, a lot of collaboration between, if you imagine everything that happens within there, it's the sort of social environment, people's privacy, it's people's walkways, the safety, there's the highway aspects, there's things that are underground, where can we put the trees to miss the services, how do we bring the smart technologies into it? And how do we make sure that we can actually deliver trees? Trees are so fundamental to the future of cities. Big trees, not little trees in back gardens. We need big street trees. We need big areas of mega trees. And the transformation of streets from something that is very traditional, very normal, very seen everywhere, into something that is much more rich, much more pedestrian friendly. Much more fun, much more seasonal, and much more rich in terms of its biodiversity and contact with nature. So this is the big challenge for London, I think, over the next 20 years or more, to transform these places. In a similar way, this is a new project that we're doing in Croydon. It's a sort of it's the Queen's Gardens and the Taburn House projects we're doing with a developer called Hub. And this is collaboration in a different way. It is the design team collaboration, traditional design team, but also it's been set up so that we develop the designs for the landscape, the regeneration of the gardens with the local community. So through consultation, through engaging with, many hundreds, actually 1,000 local people have been involved with looking at what do they want to do of this project, and developed into focus groups. There's one which is going to be looking at play, one is going to be looking at the general park environment. So we're very much looking forward actually to working with the local community to design something. And it's a new sort of skill that I think we have to all start to get to know how to work with that. How do we sort of filter all of those ideas? Because it's amazing imagination you find in these places. How do we filter that to create a coherent design? And in a similar way, this is me as a project in Bath. It's a different type of collaboration. This is with a community of Bath, not necessarily trying to create massive green infrastructure. It's about thinking about how do we transform our spaces? How do we begin to sow the seeds of actually the future? We've got to think about how we recondition our world, how we make a better quality of environment. How do we engage with the creative spirit of everybody in places like Bath? And once again, what's amazing is, we started this off with it was ourselves and a little education charity from Bath, 5x5x5, who's create, and suddenly we have 30 odd organisations, not all necessarily creative. We've now got about 18 schools involved with this. So every year we do this project pop up, and it's about people thinking about the environment, thinking about the quality of life of their environment, bringing the creativity of the community to that, recycling materials, working with interesting places, and really challenging what our future is about. And one of the big things that I'm really keen to do is to get people to think about the global environment. So it's not just about, I've got a problem at the corner of my street. It's also, how do we, within these projects, our cities, think about the big global issues of biodiversity loss, habitat loss, resource management, migration, etc., etc. And last year we transformed some of the spaces around the Abbey. Everybody was invited to make a tree, and we themed the whole thing around Madagascar as a global connection, and brought in this idea that we just want to bring a sense of Madagascar to the centre of the city. So we had this idea of do these amazing baobabs, and talk about sort of lemurs and all these sort of wonderful things. So we had these 10-metre high inflatable baobabs in front of the Abbey, and the director of conservation from Bristol Zoo talking about lemurs to all the school kids. And it's just incredible energy that comes from things like that sort of builds an awareness, I think, among the community about some of these issues. And this year we're doing something similar. This time we're going to the edge of Bath, and we're once again talking about relationships of green infrastructure to the city. This is about Bath as a sort of very beautiful, compact city with a countryside around it. What is that relationship? What does it mean to the residents of the city? And once again, compared to the last year's list of participants and schools, we've built it up again. So it's amazing momentum of people who are really interested in collaborating in making a better world. And I think that's what it's all about. Thank you.